it will be odd seeing those two people show together. But Stanley fits in neither one of those categories. That's kind of a mold breaker in the registration of the world. These things are all over the universe, you know. And I'll give you an example of something. The abstract expressionists started with what they would call order. Order was a blank canvas. They went to chaos, which was all over the place. And then they tried to make order again out of the chaos. And they had a term called "it works." Oh, it works, meaning they had found the order in the chaos. I see a lot of chaos in Stanley, personally and in his work. I think that's the nature of what artists' work does. It reflects their personal world. I don't really see any way around it. I think every piece of art that an artist makes is, in essence, a self-portrait. So I look at these as self-portraits. This is like having a funnel, a magnifying tube into Stanley's world. And even though they have what I call ordered moments, by and large, they represent an incredibly broad spectrum of thought. A lot of artists, including myself, really look for an ordered simplicity. I want an ordered world. I think that's healthy for me. You know, maybe Stanley doesn't. There are people who would say, if you don't have a real good problem, you'll create one. If you don't have a big issue, you'll just make one up. You know, it's almost like you need the problem, you need the issue, you need the force pushing against you, you need the resistance. That it, in one sense, really does make you strong. Think about how many country songs there have been about the willow tree. The willow bends and bends and bends, but it doesn't break. It just bends and bends and bends and gets stronger and bigger and stronger and stronger. But it doesn't snap because it's not rigid. These things I don't think can snap. I don't see how there can be enough force on them to snap them, because I think Stanley has dealt with the whole idea of order and chaos and rigid and simplicity, and he's put all of that paradox into these things. Stanley's been that as long as I've known him. You know, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but one day there was a knock on my door, and it was Stanley. And he said, "Hey, I come to live with you." So he did. For a year, I don't remember how long, but a long time, and lived in the studio. And even then, there was this sense of order and chaos, that the needle just moved back and forth between the two. I think the most important thing for artists is to kind of be able to and willing to accept the reality of their inner self. You know, it's like there are things that I have learned about me over the years that I just accept. I just accept it. And it helps me a great deal. I think that helps all artists a great deal, to find themselves within their art. This art is of a whole new generation than I come from. I mean, I consider myself as the very last man standing, so to speak, in the last 30 years. I mean, 30,000 years. So 30,000 years of time has passed, and it's all right here behind me. The next big jump in the future is in these things. It's here. It's with Stanley. Stanley carries the ball for us into the future, and I may very well carry the ball for us from the past. And I have a reality check within me to know that that's okay. You know, I mean, it's a different age, a different time, a different era, a different place, different circumstances, and it's a new ball game. And I think in a new ball game, you get new players. You know, you put together a new team. Someone asked earlier, they said, I hope people show up today. And I said, if 3 people show up, you've got a crowd. Everything over 3 is that's just a blessing. So I personally am honored to be here for Stanley, and I love his work, and I think it is complicated, and sometimes it is so complicated that it is very difficult for me to kind of pick out what I call the components of a stew or a soup, you know. But I love the work. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, James. That was such an honor. Yeah, I guess I should start by saying I learned something from James when I worked with him and saw a lot of his drawings. And I noticed there's never eraser mark. So I asked him, he told me every mark means something. And that was something that really stuck with me in starting out these pieces. I guess with all that, where do I start? What I like to, the concept of these is pretty simple throughout a body of work I've been doing for the last maybe 10 years. And I like to observe energy. Energy that you don't see, but maybe given off by an environment of people. I think I've subconsciously observed that and then respond to it in these works. So what I mean by that is I like to show, I used to do just images of people. And I thought, you know, that was a good exercise in a time, but I discovered maybe making little cities or little worlds would illustrate that and refine my ideas. So it gives you more on the spectrum of observing lots of people's energy in one place. So that energy, I was inspired by the film The Powers of 10 that people see in middle school, where it starts on the United States and then it'll go to the sky, then it'll go to the planets, and then far beyond the universe, and then it'll come back. And it, that really gave me a way to really illustrate this energy from different scales. So I've done many pieces where I will literally go in this far, and as you see here, you've noticed there's a lot of dots. So I did a body of work where I actually went in and broke those down into individual, almost like amoeba-like structures I call organelles. And organelles, there's cells in the body, and a lot of important things come out in the energy of people through those. So that's kind of my story. And as far as the work, when I start each piece, I kind of know where it's going, but I never just stare at a blank canvas. I like to just start pouring, and that's probably why many people in my studio see paint all over the place, and in my clothes and everything else. So when I drip and I just start going for it, it kind of naturally forms these interesting shapes and almost those amoeba-like things organically. And then what I like to do is take those organic shapes, the very natural way things lay, and then juxtapose those with images of buildings and very sharp structures. So I'm almost breaking down the architecture, and on this series, really explored that as far as you'll see a building or structure, and then the movement of it kind of breaks it down into also like the energy it's giving off. So it kind of goes deeper than just people. What else can I say here? The color scheme is something really interesting because over the years I've gone from like black and white to real subdued colors, and as I started exploring this energy thing, you almost want to explore, or I see these big bursts of color coming out next to these grays and blacks. But you know, as James was saying, there's this chaos and there's this order, and I feel like between that is balance. So even in the pieces, as it looks very chaotic, and it does, in a sense, what I try to achieve is balance. So every piece I ever do, I turn it upside down, and I check and I see, is this working as a painting this way and this way? So that is kind of how I illustrate the balance. I came from an advertising background, and layout was really something we did as an art director. So a lot of my pieces, that's how I build them. I don't necessarily use a brush, very, very rarely, but I like to spread paint. I like to put colors in different areas that kind of really pop, really push stuff back, because I think the challenge on a flat piece is you really want to try to get depth and perspective. So a lot of these images, as they come in, if you're standing very far back, I invite people to kind of come closer. I think those things push them in. And there's very small images that pop out when you get close. So I really like that this creates these little worlds that you can really see. And it was so nice to do these in the museum, in the library, because I had the challenge of this gate. And so when I saw this, I did this whole series to make it work with this. Because there's a lot of information in these, and we're in the library, and there's a lot of information here. So I think it's really a nice kind of way to show both things together. And I need a little water because my throat is dry. All these talks. All right, sorry about that.
No water.
It's okay. I don't mind.
All right, that's much better. So, these aren't necessarily in some kind of order as far as the way the pieces run, but usually I work pretty big these days. And so this is it's kind of like I worked on like one big piece and broke it down into parts. And it was really nice to work small because I haven't done it in so long. Often I use the scale, or I use a real big scale, but you know, working in these small environments really, it really challenges you to figure out really how you make a flat board not a flat board, or not appear to be a flat board, and without 3D glasses or whatever. So kind of what I did, and I used to, obviously you see a lot of chaos, but I used to cover the whole painting, or I usually do. And what I really discovered in doing these little paintings, which was really fun, is I had this really hard time with restraint. And as you can see, I expose the actual wood, and I like to have an area of real concentrated energy interaction going on. And I really learned that there's times where I can let the eye breathe. So I feel like I, not only made these pieces for this, but I really learned something from doing them. It was really nice to go back to this small environment. So,
you know, I feel like I'm always learning. I mean, from James, I learned so much, and just looking at art books and who you really look up to. And so a lot of those influences are all in this. The symbolism, there's always images, objects, and a couple of colors that you can always see in my paintings. I call it the crockett in the tubs, because Miami Vice, there's always a pink and there's always this blue or some value of it. And it just naturally is the way I like to build color, and like those two, and then I'll branch out obviously, but I usually, I like to keep things very consistent. Even as crazy as they appear, they individually can work. I really like, you know, my goal is for a viewer to come up and be able to identify that that's my piece. Just like you can look at that piece and, oh, that's a James Searles kind of thing. So that's always a goal. And, you know, I got a while to go, and I really try to learn so much from each series I do, because, I mean, that's all you can do. And places like Anderson Ranch here and the studio that a lot of us are in, it's really great in this valley. I feel so lucky because there's so many artists, and you know, we all go to each other's things, the Clay Center, different shows at Anderson Ranch, the Aspen Art Museum. So I feel really lucky, and in the 10 years I've lived here, I've gone from being a metal sculptor to a painter, and it was a real eye-opening thing, because the more you paint, the better you get, and just really concentrating and pushing it, and finally got it out of me and onto the work. So I like this work, and I encourage you all to come up and check it out and ask me questions. And God, thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I love all you guys.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, and yeah.
So you made this collection just for the library, which we're obviously very appreciative.
Thanks to you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. But so usually you work on bigger pieces. So how was that? How was it working smaller than bigger? And what
You know, in college, I majored in printmaking, and it's interesting. It made me really go back to that feeling of you're really working intricately. I don't know if Brian, are you here? I saw Brian, you know, he's at SAW, he's right next to me. In fact, he's right here also. He did this. So how cool is that? But I've seen him in the studio, it's about this big. And he's drawing all this cool stuff, and he's got a press, and I was like, wow, that really inspires me. It's like I want to go back to doing these plates, and doing printmaking. But you know, it's cool that you can be inspired by your peers. I think that's why SAW is so amazing, or the Clay Center, or places like that, because you really learn from each other. You say, hey, what do you think? And they could just rip you apart, and it makes you feel a lot better. I mean, because, you know, if you have the perspective of, hey, you're right, I need to learn from this, and we're not even doing it on purpose, but we're really learning from each other. And yeah, so do you guys have any questions? I'm happy to. Miss Amy Kimberly?
So, what kind of mediums are you using on here? Is it all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I forgot to say that. I like to use there's 4 or 5 materials that I've been really experimenting with lately, and India ink is always something that's in my pieces, because as I'm building them, I start, you know, with the dripping, and then kind of like the powers of 10. Start with the dripping, kind of go in further and do a little detail further. So when I get to the end part of the pieces, I'll go in with India ink and create these really intricate images and really darken stuff, because I'm really interested in making stuff pop. And I think that comes from loving sculpture and also this graphic design background, where if you're laying out an ad, you know, they always say, oh, it's got to pop, it's got to pop. So for some reason that always stuck with me. But anyway, yeah, so I'll go in with the NDA, and then things do really get chaotic. I push stuff way too far. It's his life, and then I come back to the middle by, I'm really enjoying using collage elements, but really trying to not make anything identifiable. Like I'll take a building here or there, or I'll take part of a thing, rip it out, and then add to it, for example, this one right here. So this is an image, and then I'll kind of keep going with it. And that really helps me because everything's built in layers for the most part. So these things really sharpen up all the chaos and looseness and kind of bring it back to the mid-level, if you will. And acrylic paint is always in my pieces, dripping. I love using stencils. And my paint brushes these days are these kind of graffiti markers. Instead of brushing or using brushes, if I want to spread paint, I'll take like a card and I'll spread something, and it just kind of helps I need to be loose in these, and I need to not think too hard about what's going on, because naturally it kind of ends up, and I figure out at the end, because I know where they're going, but I also want to make things stand on their own, but also be very consistent, and you can tell that everything is a series, or I feel that way, or that's what I'm trying to achieve. So I guess my materials would be acrylics, spray paint, collage, these paint markers. And then this actually is interesting. This is tape. All the black, real harsh lines are tape. And I usually like to put that down and cut it with like an X-Acto knife and spray it and then pull the tape up. But I was working on this one. This is an earlier one I did. I started cutting them out, and I was really interested in, it was really interesting to see those lines and how the layers are coming through. So I kept it, and I treated it as a collage element. And I really tried, even though I'm telling you this, but I really tried to make it look like it wasn't tape. So, but you know, hey, you're here, so you get all the secrets. Anything you want to know. So yeah, like here's another example. I'll take this collage image, which is kind of just, it's from like a graphic novel. I pull stuff from everything, even expensive art books, which is, anyway, so this goes through, and it was just this flat image of this black and white kind of bricks, and so then I would go and continue it on with this India ink I was talking about, because you get these really, really dark tones. The darkest black you can get, really. So that's really, those are my materials. Ramsey, did you have a question, my man?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you own the pieces or you displayed them for us today, or who put them on this.
You know, me and Angela here, thankfully, we put them on the wall, or this thing today. And that was one of the challenges. You know, usually you're thinking walls, but it lets you think. It challenges you. So actually, before I even started these pieces, I saw this thing. We went around, it could be in there, it could be in there. And so I kind of took on this challenge and, you know, did the best I could with the environment, and just like the paintings. Like they end up these environments that, you know, who knows what's going on, but you just gotta go with the flow sometimes. So yeah, we set this up this morning, but I planned all week. You know, when I saw them, I built the pieces to at least work with them.
Yeah.
But you're an architect, so you tell me, man. That's,
No,
I don't,
my observation was it's really kind of goes with your flow of style. There is really no symmetry or linear grid or vertical, positioning.
I'm glad you said that.
There's a randomness to it, but it's very balanced at the same time.
Thank you. Nice. That means I did a good job. Because I tell you, I had, you know, it took a while to figure out how to do that, how to make it look balanced. I only had 9 pieces, so actually I liked how it kind of went like that. It almost works with the things that make you want to kind of dive in, but that's good, because we turned stuff around and all this, and if it looks balanced to you, that's A+. All right. Anyone else have a question? Well, thank you so much it's an honor that people are interested and want to learn more about my work, and I encourage you to check out all the people at our studios and James's work and everybody, because you'll see there's a whole community here of people doing what I'm doing, and it's really, I feel real lucky to live here. So thank you very much, and I encourage you to. All right, dance party time.